Alright, so welcome back guys. This is part 2 of the logo designing tutorial. For this one we are going to be using Photoshop. You may be able to do it in some other programs like Paint.net, but this is just the one that I use. So what you'll want to do is hit open, and then just navigate to that picture that we took of our sketch last time, and just go ahead and open it up. Now, like I was saying, you'll need to have all four corners of the actual logo itself in the picture so that we can use the perspective crop tool. Then you'll just click and drag over the whole piece, like that. I would zoom in a little bit, and then the cool thing is you can just adjust the corners so that they all line up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just good enough to get everything in straight parallel lines. That looks a little sus. Okay. Just try it again. There we go. That's good enough. Okay, so for the first step, what I did was I just looked up cool like color palettes online. So let me grab the image that I found for it. Let me see here. Need to erase my downloads. Way too much stuff in there. So yeah, I just found this on a website. I'll put the link down in the description, but they include like 50 different palettes you can choose from, and it's free to use. But if you already have a color scheme in mind or something like that, you know, feel free to use it, of course. Alright, so after that we'll just go down to the shape key here, and we'll just set it to rectangle for now. And what we'll want to do is just click at the very top of this middle line here and drag all the way down to the bottom of this first ridge. Then we'll drag across just to line everything up. Now we can go ahead and set the color using this little button here. You can enter it in manually if you're using like hex keys or things like that. Or, sorry, hex codes. But you can also just use the little eyedropper tool to go ahead and select whichever color you want from the palette. Then, if we go to the direct selection tool, that actually allows us to go through and edit individual corners of the shapes. So if I wanted to drag this one up, you can just click on it, hold shift, and drag it up without moving it on any other axis. So there we go. Then I will do the same for this top corner here. Alright. So on this one here, I had the idea of having a like gold banner kind of on the bottom. So what we can do for that is if we open up the layers tab here, we can actually duplicate this one twice. And then if we merge these shapes, actually, so let me grab this top one real quick and just scoot it up to about right there. Now, if I unhide this, you can see that there's just that little bit of space left at the bottom. So if we merge shapes, then go over to the path selection tool and select the bottom one, and just make sure that it is on combine shapes. Then we select the top one and hit exclude overlapping shapes. You can see that we do kind of have an interesting system that we can use. The one we want to go for is subtract front shapes on this one. So now if we go up here, we can go ahead and set this. I'm going to use this one as kind of a lighter gold color, just to give a little more variation. Then we can actually duplicate this one. Hit Control T, And then up here where it says W, that stands for width. So if we just put a minus sign in front of it, it lets us mirror it. Now, it does look a little bit weird, but that is because we have only mirrored one of the shapes, and not the top one that cuts everything out. So, if we go like that, actually, it looks like we forgot to mirror the bottom one. So, just select the other one there, hit Control T, and negative. There we go. And then, of course, we can go through with our shape tool and just select that darker gold color. And that gives us kind of a banner down there at the bottom. Now I will actually go through and duplicate this one as well. Hitting Control T and then negative 100%. That way we get a mirror on it as well. We'll just drag that over so that everything lines up. Alright, so now for these three little smaller flags at the bottom, we can see that they are basically just a square that is a 2x2 space, and then a little triangle that is a 1x2 space. So what we can do is, let's see here, go back to our shape tool and just click on the square again, and then I'll do this over here to make it a little easier. If we click and drag, normally it is just a rectangular shape, but if you hold shift, it actually sets it to be a square, so you can't kind of deviate from that. So if I set that to be 2x2 and just change the color here. Now the interesting thing is it actually keeps track of the recent colors used. So this one here is that same gray color we used for the rest of the flag, so it makes it a little bit easier instead of having to go through and find that color again. So off of that, you can click and hold on the shape tool key. Here. So I use a drawing tablet for most of my Photoshop work, so sometimes when I click on something, it opens a dialog menu on a different screen, which is kind of a pain. So, like I was saying, if you click and hold on the shape key, or the shape tool key, you can click polygon tool, and that lets you just make a shape with a random number, or a set number of sides. So, of course, if you set it to 3, that lets you make a triangle. So what we can do is go ahead and hold shift, and if you rotate your mouse around, it lets you rotate the triangle. Now, I think that this here is about the right size. It's a little bit long, but that's okay. So you can see that when I drag it, it actually snaps into place. So if I go here, it snaps on that right hand side, and if I go here, it snaps on the left hand side in the middle. So that lets me know that it's just a little bit too long. So if I hit Control T, it pulls up this little adjustment menu, so I can click on this side here. If I hold shift, it scales down the whole thing, but if I just do it manually, it lets me go ahead and just edit that one side. And then I can go ahead and scoot up this bottom. That way it looks like it's all even. Now, these two shapes have been made onto separate layers, which you can keep it like that if you want, but I try to keep as few layers as possible just to keep everything organized, since I don't go through and bother trying to rename everything. So we want to line it up on this this left hand side, and then just scoot it down using the shift key until it looks about right. Looks pretty good. Okay. Real quick, I did want to merge those two sides of the flags here, just to, like I was saying, keep everything a little more organized. Then we'll duplicate this smaller flag on the bottom just a couple times. We'll scoot it over just like that. And line it up just in the middle there. Alright. So, Next up, we'll actually go and do the letter in the middle. So what I'll do is I'll unlock this bottom layer here and just drag it to the very top and set the opacity to about 30%. Actually, maybe 50%. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So after that, we'll go to the rounded rectangle tool and just set this radius to 1000 since we want such a large curve on it. Then you can see that this letter here, the actual largest part of the Q, takes up a space of 6 spaces by, looks like 9 spaces. So what we'll do is we'll just go up to the very upper left of it, just about right there. Then without holding shift or anything like that, we can actually just go down here. So you can see that once it has that pink line in the middle, it's actually mirrored along the middle of the Photoshop canvas. So if we go like that, that should be a perfect mirror. Now, this is actually made on top of our reference layers, so if we just drag that on top, we can go ahead and select the rounded rectangle tool and just do the same thing for this middle circle. So now we have these 2 circles that are the same color. If we merge the shapes, go over to our direct path tool, I think I scooted it a little bit, and just select that middle one, we can go through and hit subtract front layer, and you can see that it is a little bit dark right now. So let me go ahead and just get this color set up real quick. Alright, there we go. So that's how you kind of cut out a circular shape in an object like this. So we have one last little mark, which is the tail of the Q. So honestly, this would be a little bit easier if you just zoomed in a little bit, but I wanted to keep the video looking a little more presentable, so I'll skip it for now. There we go. Okay, so that's a basic Q shape. What we can do is go ahead and just duplicate the layers. We can merge these two and set the color to something a little bit darker. So if we open up this color tool, we can just drop it down maybe about there. Now you can't see anything because it's overlapping the other 2 shapes, so if we scoot it down a couple layers, we can see that we have that brighter color back. And if we just select the layer and go up here to this move tool and just hold the down arrow key, we can slide it down a little bit to get a more 3D looking shape. Then if you right click and click blending options and go to drop shadow, it makes it stand out from the background just a little bit better. And I'll actually go through and do that on the tail of the Q as well, just to make it look like it's overlapping the actual shape itself. So I wanted to add a highlight to the Q shape, so on this brighter main part of the Q, I will go ahead and hit duplicate layer. Let me see here. And then I will go ahead and just make a square shape. So what we can do is if we go to the direct path tool and just select one of these corners, hit delete, it gives us this nice little right triangle we can use. So after that, you can just take the color, move it a little bit farther up on the scale to get kind of a highlight, and then just move, or select both of those shapes, the main part of the Q that you just duplicated and the triangle, and then hit merge shapes. Then if you go over to the let me see here, to the path selection tool and just select the right triangle, you can hit intersect shape areas, and it will just give you the area of that right triangle that is also overlapping the other Q shape that you had. Now if we do this again for the tail of the Q, it'll bring it out just a little bit more. So let me go ahead and get that set up real quick. Alright, there we go. Now, if you wanted to adjust where that actual triangle lies, if you go back over to the path selection tool and just select it, you can use the arrow keys to kind of move it around, and Control T to scale it up and down if you want to. So if I wanted it a little bit bigger, I could do that. Now I will actually go ahead and on the back of the flag here, I'll duplicate it as well and add a highlight. This one's going to be a little bit bigger, so I will just go like that. Move that up just a little bit. The new and current section is actually kind of helpful. It lets you see kind of how different it's going to look. It looks pretty good to me. So if we merge these two shapes, and again, path selection tool, select the triangle, and just set it to intersect shape areas, I will actually move it up a little bit. Now, the shape I made wasn't actually a square, it was a rectangle, which kind of throws the proportions off. So, if I adjust that just a little bit. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so that's the largest part of it done. The only thing we have left to do is the wreath shape around the rest of it. So what we can do is just move over to the ellipse tool, change the fill to none, and then the stroke, which is the outline, to that base green color that we were using. You can see that I've actually changed the color of one of the smaller flags because I have that selected. So we will actually not do any of that. So we can just undo it by hitting Control Z. There we go. Now, when you're editing colors and things like that, make sure that you're on the reference layer just so you can't actually change anything. So change the fill to none, and then the stroke to that base green color, and that should be good. So we can see that the circle itself takes up a space of 3, 6, so that would be 12 spaces by 12 spaces. So if we go down to just the most left-hand space and the most bottom space, we can make a circle. If you hold shift, it'll allow you to make a perfect circle without having to worry about it being skewed in any direction. So just like that there. Now I will actually go ahead and move this just to the very back. That way we don't have to worry about cutting out the space that would lay over the rest of it. Now for the actual leaves themselves, they can be a little complicated, but essentially anything you can break down into a couple of smaller shapes. So one way that you could do it is, you know, you could just take a circle here, change the fill back to that green, and just, there you go, that's a leaf. But I'm not a huge fan of how it looks. I prefer leaves to kind of have a pointed end. So the way that you would do that is you would still make a ellipse, but you would just keep it a circle for now. And then you would also make just a square. So you can keep it. Essentially what you're going to do here is merge the two shapes, and just like we did earlier, you'll select one of them. I'm going to use the square here using the path selection tool, and just hit exclude overlap, actually subtract front shape, and that'll give you just this nice little half circle that's a little pointed on one end. And then you can just duplicate the layer, hit Control T, and then negative on the width to mirror it, and then you just scoot this layer over until it's joined up. Now, one issue I found is when you zoom out pretty far with this kind of setup, you can see like a small line in the middle. So usually what I would do to combat that is, let me actually line that up there. If you click on the brush tool and just add a new layer, you can write over the middle of it. So we set the color there using the color picker. So if I hide one of these real quick so we can kind of see a little bit better, what I want to do is I want to just add a line right down the middle. Now the reason why I do this instead of joining the shapes is because we have those two squares kind of cutting things out. If we were to merge the two, it would make it a little more complicated. So it's easier just to add a new group, select all three of those, and add it. So from there I wanted to add a kind of a stem for the leaf, so we can just open up the line tool. You can set the width to whatever you want, but because we're using two mirrored objects, I would set it to something even. That way you have an exact division between them, the two halves. Then we can just scoot it over so it is lined up to the middle and push it in. There we go. I'll actually make that a little bit shorter. So that is how you would make a leaf. So let me tone this back down to about 50%. Then we can hit Control, then selecting our group, we can hit Control T to rotate it to where we like. And what we want to do is just line that up to the circle that we had made earlier. So just like that there. Now, what you'll do is you'll just go ahead and duplicate the group for each of the leaves. So every time there's a leaf, we'll just duplicate the group. And then with the group selected, you'll hit Control T, rotate it to where you want, and then just line it up. I will actually move this one here, the first one, just a little bit because it hasn't quite lined up to where I wanted it to. That looks pretty good. So you'll just go through and do the rest of the leaves. It will take you a little bit of time, but it's easier than remaking every leaf one by one. Another good thing is you don't actually have to do all of the leaves. Since the design is mirrored over the, I'll call it the x-axis or the middle here, you can actually just rotate it around and mirror it. So if we hide this real quick, you can see that there are a few spaces where the stem actually pokes out. So what we can do is if we go back down to our circle, select it, and then go over to the tool, your shape tool. You can actually use any one. I will just bump this up to about 20. And that actually will go ahead and cover up any of those small mistakes that we had made. So if you go ahead and just select all of those groups we made and hit duplicate layers. Now this can be a little resource intensive just because you're moving so many shapes at one time. So if you have a good computer, I'd recommend doing this, but if you have, you know, maybe not the newest system, I might just move over all of the shapes by themselves. And then you can either click and hold or use the arrow keys to just scoot everything over until it's all lined up. There we go. It looks pretty good. And that is actually the end of the tutorial. You can move the leaves behind the actual flag itself if you'd like, just by selecting all of the groups and moving the layer underneath. But I do think it looks a little bit nicer with the leaves actually overlaying everything. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This finishes up our logo designing tutorial. I'll still be uploading things in the future like speed draws, maybe some gameplay for some video games and stuff like that. We've got the whole month of October that I'm kind of working on. Day 2 now, I actually still have to do that sketch. But if you like the video, make sure to subscribe. I'll put out probably pretty similar stuff to it in the future. But yeah, thanks for watching.